Hi everybody, I'm Miss Cooksey and today we're going to talk about calculating slope. We're going to look at the four different kinds of slope in this video. We'll look at positive slope, negative slope, zero slope, and undefined slope. And we'll also learn how to calculate each slope using a table, a graph, and 2 points. So let's start with positive slope. Positive slope means that as the x values increase, the y values increase. So it's always going to be going up like you see in this graph. To calculate slope from a table, we're going to look at the change in the x values and the change in the y values. So here from 0 to 2, we go up 2. From 2 to 4, we go up 2. From negative 2 to negative 1, we go up 1. And you go from negative 1 to 0, we go up 1. You know it's going to be positive slope when we are going up by a constant rate of change for both the x and the y value. If they are both going up or both going down, it's going to be positive slope. To calculate the slope of the line, we are going to take the change in y, which is represented here by this triangle y that's pronounced delta y. It means change in y. Delta is the Greek letter. So we're going to have the change in y over the change in x. So we took this value that represents the change in y that we're going up one time, and we took this value that represents the change in x that we're going up twice, and we placed them in this formula, delta y over delta x, and we get 1/2. That's our slope. Next, we're going to look at how to calculate slope with points. So here I took 2 of the points from this chart. I took 0, -2, and 2, -1. So the first 2 points on this table. And I'm going to substitute them into this formula. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, what's really cool about this formula is it's actually the same thing we did up here. y2 minus y1 is the change in y. It's how much y changes from the first y coordinate to the second. X2 minus x1 is the change in x. It's how much the x coordinate changes from the first point to the second point. So I'm going to label my points x1, y1 for my first point, x2, y2 for my second point, and I'm going to substitute those values in. So I have -1 minus -2 over 2 minus 0. One thing that can be really tricky with calculating slope is that when we subtract a negative, we have to remember it's adding a positive. So 1 plus 2 is 1, 2 minus 0 is 0. M, or my slope, is 1/2. Last but not least, we can calculate slope from a graph. So to calculate slope from a graph, we look at rise over run. Rise is how much we go up in the y direction. It's the change in y. Run is how much we go up in the x direction. It's the change in x. So all of these equations are actually the same, just written in different ways. So let's look at their change in y from one point to the next. And these are just these 3 points from the table graphed on the graph. So between this point and this point, we go up 1 unit in the y direction, and then we go right 2 units in the x direction. So up 1 is +1, right 2 is +2. That leaves me with a slope 1/2. So that is looking at positive slope using the 3 different ways of calculating. Next, we're going to look at negative slope. So negative slope points down. So as the x values increase, the y values decrease. That means when you're looking at the table, one of your values is going to be going up by a constant rate of change, and one is going to be going down. So here, I have my x values are 0, 1, and 2. They are going up by 1 every time. My y values are 1, -1, and -3. They are going down by 2 every time. So my change in y is -2. My change in x is +1. -2 divided by 1 is -2. Then I'm going to use my slope formula to take these first 2 points from my table and calculate the slope using the slope formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So y2 minus y1 is -1 minus 1, x2 minus x1, 1 minus 0. That gives me -2 divided by 1, or -2. Last but not least, I want to look at my graph. Again, I just graphed the points from this table, and we're going to look at rise over run. So here, when I'm going left to right along my points, from this point to this point, I'm actually going down 2. So instead of going up, I'm going down. So that means I'm going -2, then I'm going right 1. -2 is my rise, down 2, my run is right 1, down is always negative, right is always positive, so -2 divided by 1 is -2. Now we're going to look at two special slopes. These are zero slope and undefined slope. Zero slope is always a horizontal line. Undefined slope is always a vertical line. So notice here, my x values each go up by 1, and my y values stay the same. They go up by 0. That means when I calculate slope using my formula for a table, my change in y is 0, my change in x is 1. Ooh, whoops. My change in x is 1. 0 divided by anything is always 0. So this shows us that my slope here is 0. And any horizontal line you ever see, the slope will be 0. Now let's use our slope formula to prove this another time. Here, my y2 and my y1 are both 3. My x2 and my x1 are 1 and 0, so I have 3 minus 3 and 1 minus 0. That again gives me 0 over 1, which again is 0. Trying to do this with rise over run, you'll notice my rise, I don't actually go up at all, so my rise is up 0. My run is right 1, so that gives me 0 over 1, which is 0. So no matter what, whether I use a table, coordinates, or a graph, a horizontal line slope is always 0. Now let's talk about an undefined slope. An undefined slope is always a vertical line. The reason for that is that here our change in x is 0. Our x value stays the same, and our y value goes up by 1. Well, that means that my change in y is 1 and my change in x is 0. Well, we can't actually divide by 0 because it's impossible to put anything into 0 groups. Having the existence of the thing means it must exist in one group. Dividing by 0 is impossible. That means we're going to call it undefined. So our slope here is undefined. You'll notice that this is also the only example of a linear equation that's not a function. This doesn't pass the vertical line test. That's another reason it's undefined. We can prove that again using our 2 points or our graph. So if I use 2 points, I have y2 minus y1, 1 minus 0, x2 minus x1, -3 minus -3, which leaves me with 1 divided by 0, which is also undefined. Rise over run, well, I'm going up 1 each time, but I'm not moving left or right, so I'm going right 0. 1 divided by 0 is undefined. So in this video, we talked about how to calculate slope using a table and delta y over delta x, using 2 points, and using the formula m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, or using a graph and using our rise over run formula. We also learned that a positive slope is when the change in x and the change in y both have the same sign, so they're both positive or both negative. A negative slope means that the change in x and the change in y have different signs, so one's positive, one's negative. A zero slope is always a horizontal line, and an undefined slope is always a vertical line. Thanks for watching. Hope this video was helpful. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a video, and I'll see you next time.